Donald Trump appears to have insulted recipients of the Medal of Honor. The comment was one of the first things he said when speaking at an event yesterday at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, about anti-Semitism, while praising Miriam Adelson, who he awarded the Medal of Freedom back in 2018. He then argued the civilian award is better than the one that is given to soldiers.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's very...
Mike, I don't know in the history of American politics anybody that I've ever heard say anything remotely as callous as that, but it does line up with what General Kelly, his longest-serving chief of staff, said, that he told him he just didn't understand why people would serve and sacrifice for their country, and also what Jeffrey Goldberg, in quoting people that served with Donald Trump, talking about how Donald Trump said that people who died were losers and suckers, and he didn't want to go to the cemetery. Here you have him saying, you know, the civilian honor is a lot better than the military honor, because to get the military honor, you're either shot up or dead. I do wonder what all of those Medal of Honor winners who have sacrificed so much, and the families of fallen American heroes, think when they hear a former commander-in-chief say that.
You know, Joe, we just lost a Medal of Honor recipient who died a few days ago, maybe a week ago, Colonel Bucha, B-U-C-H-A. Look up his obituary, read his obituary. He was awarded, you never win any medal. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his capacity to take care of the men who were serving under him during a fight raging in the jungle of Vietnam. You should read his obituary for the extraordinary things Colonel Bucha did after he left the service. So there's that. There's also what we just witnessed, what we just heard from the former President of the United States. We've alluded to this before. He is a uniquely damaged individual, a solitary individual who cannot understand the concept of belonging to a group, whether it's a group of people, voters, of individuals. He can't understand it. He's all about himself. He's a solo act. And Susan Glasser, you've been covering him now for probably too many years in your mind, writing about him, probably too much in your mind. But this capacity of this man to not understand others because his focus is always on himself is truly astounding to a lot of people.
Yeah, Mike, you know, I really appreciate your comment there about the fallen soldier. It reminds me when we were reporting our book about Trump in the White House, another example. Remember how he wanted to hold a military parade? He came back from France in the Bastille Day parade. Well, according to our reporting, he said there was one thing he really didn't like about the Bastille Day parade in France, and that was that there was a group of soldiers, honored French soldiers in that parade who had lost limbs, who were in wheelchairs and the like. And Trump said, I don't want that in my parade. It doesn't look good for me. And of course, the shocked advisor said, what are you talking about, sir? Those are the most honored soldiers, those who sacrificed for their country. Donald said, yeah, I don't want it. It doesn't look good for me. And I'm reminded of that in those comments yesterday. You know, he believes somehow that those who sacrifice for their country are not whole, are not, you know, rather than being brave, he sees them as, quote, suckers and losers. And, you know, this campaign, I think, is once again casting in sharp relief the idea of Trump and the questions around his fitness for office. Trump can't stop from putting those questions squarely in front of the American voters. And especially now that Biden has dropped out, it seems to me that it's Trump himself who's making the issue of his capacity for office, his erratic personality, the issue of the campaign.
You know, Donnie, we talk on this show a lot, and this week even, about the numbness to what Donald Trump says and does from the public, from the media, frankly, many times. When he said what he said about John McCain in 2015, it was viewed as totally disqualifying. It's over for him. It wasn't, it turned out. And that was one of the early warning signs that he was going to do well and survive that. But man, when he stops, for those of us who honor the service of veterans and people who are injured and die in war, for those of us who have family members whose lives were forever altered by a war that he dodged, well, you have to stop and point out again and ask people who support him, do you agree with that? Are you okay with that, the way he's talking about our veterans?
Yeah, he didn't, according to Kelly, he didn't want to see, amputees on stage. He threw his course. I'll tell you another thing that he said that just continues to offend me when he talks about what a good Jew is and how a Jew should vote. And first of all, I'm a proud Jew and I'm a proud Democrat, voting Democrat. And what a good Jew is about, Donald Trump, you know nothing about being selfless, about being empathetic, about doing for others. You're the antithesis of what Judaism stands for. And I'm so tired of people telling me automatically, the Republicans are good for Israel and the Democrats not. The Biden administration has let Israel prosecute this war in every single way they need to prosecute it. And Donald Trump's solution has been end it fast. That's been his solution. And Kamala Harris has come out and said that Israel needs to defend itself. They need to go after terrorists. Yes, she said they need to do it in a humane way, and she's been concerned about humanitarian efforts. As a Jew, I'm okay with that. So I'm tired of this head fake about Republicans are better for the Jews than the Democrats. It's just not true.
Well, Susan, you have a new piece online this morning for The New Yorker entitled Kamala Harris's Best Campaign Surrogate is Donald Trump. And in it, you write in part, quote, practically every time Donald Trump has opened his mouth since Joe Biden stepped aside, the ex-president has made the case for his own manifest unfitness for office. What better assistance could Kamala Harris ask for? Consider just the past few days. On Sunday, Trump actually claimed in a social media post that Harris's campaign had faked a crowd of 15,000 people who had showed up for a recent rally at a Detroit airport hangar. On Monday night, in a 2-hour conversation on X with its owner, Elon Musk, Trump went off on so many tangents that it was almost a relief when he mentioned his apparent plan to self-exile to Venezuela if he lost to Harris. By Wednesday, in a speech in North Carolina, Trump once again made a mockery of Republican leaders who have been publicly pleading with him to abandon personal attacks on the vice president in favor of a more substantive, policy-focused case for himself. In a press conference on Thursday afternoon, Trump mocked Harris as a communist who is going to ruin the entire world if she is elected. When Trump began attacking Harris in earnest a couple of weeks ago, she condemned his remarks about her racial background as the same old show. I say let the show play on for at least a few more months. Every time Trump talks, he's making the case for her. And, I get the feeling, Susan, the campaign knows that because they do a lot of his quotes on social media and just sort of respond with one or two words.
Yeah, I noticed yesterday that they actually promoted Trump's press conference in advance and sent out a press release giving the time and date and location of the press conference yesterday. And, you're not going to be going out on a limb at this moment in the Trump arc if you predict that he's going to say some, weird and bizarre and nonsensical things in public. He can't stop himself from seeking the spotlight. And what's striking to me is that Kamala Harris's political imperative and Donald Trump's personal imperative have now collided. He has a personal need to constantly be in the subject, to change the story if it's ever about his opponent. And she has a need for this election to be about Donald Trump and his fitness for office and not about herself. And I think that it's those two things that are converging right now in this remarkable campaign.
You know, Donnie, I just wanted to check this to make sure. You know, Donald Trump goes around and he does say that if you're a Jew and you don't vote for him, you're a bad Jew. I just went back and I checked the numbers after your statement. In 2020, 77% of the Jewish vote voted for Joe Biden. Only 21% voted for Donald Trump. And even in the run-up to the 2024 election, when Joe Biden was the candidate, 72% of Jewish voters said they were going to vote for Joe Biden, and only 22% for Donald Trump. So all we hear, and we always hear it in the media, and we hear it about how, you know, Donald Trump is going to win a huge number of black voters. He's going to win a huge number of Jewish voters because he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's going to win this. He's going to win that. It just never pans out. I mean, you know, Kamala Harris is going to, I would be surprised if she didn't get 74%, 75% of the Jewish vote this year. I'd be very surprised if that weren't the case in the years to come as well.
I couldn't agree with you. I'm glad you brought up those stats. 3/4 of Jews vote Democrat, have voted Democrat.
So he's saying 3/4 of Jews in America are bad Jews because they don't vote for him.
Yeah, this is the man that said they were good people on both sides of Charlottesville. And Donald Trump is the most transactional human being alive. And I think he would sell anybody down the river, including Israel. I believe nothing he says. And as I said, 3/4 of Jews vote Democrat. They will continue to. And it's a head fake, this automatic, this is what Jews should do. Shame on you, Donald Trump. It's disgusting.